Hi, so this is Rayne here with an early edition of the Science Fridays. I'm just going to go ahead and bring it out to science whenever I get around to it days. So, yeah, anyhow, today's conversation is going to center around pole shifts. And it's basically one of the largest and most controversial topics about the world at the current moment among serious geologists and geological scientists, talking about the world that we live in, experiencing a polar shift at the moment. Um, that has been the case from time to time for poles to shift. It is common with a planet like ours that pole shifts do occur once every, you know, a few thousand years or whatever. We see evidence of that all throughout history where the poles have shifted before. Through the works of Charles Hapgood. I want to refer to him more clearly than anyone else because of his most accurate views of what could really happen given this occurrence if it were to be on a larger and more dangerous scale. Because the Earth as we know it, its polar shift and its current location of all the continents could change because pole shifting can occur to loosen the outer shell of the Earth or the crust that we live upon and make it move freely upon the mantle, at least in one small or a larger than a continent area. Quite possibly during a weakened spot or there are other areas where the crust is not so thick can be particularly vulnerable to this sort of displacement. Now, that also depends on the amount of magnetic deposit that is present in the sediment there. It's above the area that's weaker as to what will happen to it under its greatest stress and impact and threat. An event of that occurrence would be predicated upon the magnetic bond that it has or grip that it has upon that part of the crust. Other areas that are probably blocking it from moving could exceed the pressure. We could see some massive earthquakes that could occur in shallower areas. It's quite possible it could occur to create some mountain ranges, in certain areas too, some larger mountain ranges we've ever seen, but depending upon how intense this shift is, will determine how much it impacts the surface of the Earth directly. Now, the relationship of the Earth in regard to the sun is rather connected. It's not so much that we're far away from it, like not impacted by its weather, because we are. Every bit of its weather impacts us and determines the weather on the Earth directly by heat and thermal energy transference between both objects through the electromagnetic spectrum and the conductivity of both planets, the star and the Earth, in that relationship in that regard. Now, because of the distance from us and the sun will be determinant to how much intense radiation we would get, depending upon the amount of CME that comes away from the sun. This could really impact the Earth, and a space weather event could start some things to occur in this realm, but it is not global warming. What is occurring is a pole shift, and that does happen every once in a while. It just depends on the intensity. So there again, you heard it here on the Rayne Show. Pole shift, that sort of news doesn't really surprise me because I've been hearing about it for a while now, about a pole shift. And the reasons that pole shifts occur is because, well, our poles, the Earth itself is a magnet, a giant magnet. You have a positive end and a negative end. And they tend to swap places sometimes, depending upon the intensity of the radiation from the magnet and its counteracting source, whatever's making it hold to that polar orientation, i.e. the sun. The sun itself is basically a protector and a guard, I would say, for the magnetic poles to be stabilized. Without the interaction of the moon and the sun, we would not have a stable planet at all, at least not in regard to the polar lock. Would not have a polar lock. And thus the days and nights would be slowly deteriorating into a what do you call it? The geosynchronous orbit, which means one side of the Earth would face the sun always, and the other side would face the darkness. That's generally what would happen without polar regularity. Eventually, enough time would pass, the Earth would spin down to a halt, and then we would have geostationary orbits. Yeah. Or synchronous orbit to the poles or something. I can't remember what that's called. Geosynchronous orbit is what they talk about with the GPS satellites. But with the sun, I suppose that would be, I forget what they call it. Anyway, not important. Just the point is that it could occur without the moon. We have the moon, so no need to worry about that. The issue with the polar shift that could occur would be we'd have some earthquakes. Things wouldn't be where they're supposed to be. We would see probably a different location of the equator and a different location of the North and South Pole. But that's about it. If it did cause anything super bad, it would be in the realm of volcanoes, earthquakes in weaker areas. But other than that, I don't see any cause for alarm. But there is quite a bit of a problematic area with the South Pole or North Pole, the equatorial region being just north of the Great Lakes. So basically, Canada would be the North Pole, and the United States would be below well, actually, no. It's the equatorial line. So, yeah, Canada and parts of the Great Lakes would be at the equator. Then the North and South Pole would be South America, South Pole. North Pole would be somewhere it looks like Europe. Yeah. From this photograph, it looks like Europe. Anyway, that's just a synopsis and a guess. So based on what's occurring here, that's what it looks like. But anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about today. So have a good one. Thanks again for coming.